In a world where Africans have lost their roots, it has become of vital importance to document our ways. In an effort to reverse the brainwashing of the past, where we were made to believe our ways are demonic, we are pressed to create dignified and respectful platforms to unpack our spiritual ways.
Moya light, Moya bright. Welcome to another exciting episode of Moya. Thank you guys for all your support and your love. Thank you for contributing. Please do like, share, and subscribe, guys. You are doing so badly in that arena. Please, can you like? I see you guys watching the videos. Please do like. As you know, I like to bring you guys elders who are going to help us recover our history and reprogram our DNA, because the education that we got in the Mlungu schools isn't quite the one that is going to help us self-actualize. And therefore, that's why we started the University of Moya, to bring you the best healers and teachers. Today, I've got a knowledge architect with us, Vuyisile Charles Ndabeni, and you've worked extensively in the tourism industry. So I'm thinking that today's conversation, we're going to talk a little bit about the land. Not that?
Well, we can do a combination of many things because, firstly, I'm a reflexologist. Yes, I'm a knowledge architect. Equally, I'm an innovative disruptor. You know, we must disrupt this economy because we don't own anything in this economy.
Yes.
Fourthly, very important, I'm an African spiritualist. And it's a very important issue that we need to discuss today. But lastly, after hours, I'm an African metaphorist. So maybe I should start with the last one and end up with the first one.
Okay, we're ready.
I use African metaphor to make Africans laugh. It's not comedy, because you know what he said about comedy is that people are made to laugh about their pain, about their suffering.
Oh, especially South Africa.
And they pay for it, you know? And for me, that's very cruel. If you know what impact it has on people, it demeans them. Their esteem levels are very low all the time because they think that they are subhuman, you know? So let me give you my best metaphor. Listen, I've got 40 of them. An elephant and a mouse were crossing over an old bridge. And this bridge happens to be in Africa because it's only in Africa when the colonial masters left. They left with a master plan. So these Africans can't maintain this bridge because there's no master plan. So in the process of crossing the bridge, because of the size of the elephant, and please don't look at me, the bridge was heavily shaken. Now, let me give you a biological profile of an elephant. An elephant has a memory capacity 6 times more than any other living species. It can live up until 100 years. An average elephant weighs about 7,500 kilograms. It eats 400 kilograms of food every day. It drinks 200 liters of water every day. The gestation period is 22 months. It's not 9 months. The spermatology capacity of an elephant bull. Do you know what is our spermatology capacity?
No, I don't know it.
And guess what? You know, after some horizontal recreation, we make a lot of noise.
Yes.
For nothing.
You do, yes.
We only meet out 6 centimeters of sperms, by the way. That's the best we can give you guys, right? But listen to this. Juxtapose this against an elephant bull. 500 grams of sperms.
What?
Yeah. Now, I know Africans are mathematically challenged. They don't know the difference between grams and centimeters, but we can have another bilateral, right? But here's the deal. As soon as they cross on the safe side of the bridge, and listen very carefully, because for me, this is what this discussion is about. The mouse says, and I quote, "We shook the bridge." I got you, Ntsiki. You know what is that called? Delayed reaction syndrome. The mouse, as soon as they get on the safe side, the mouse says, We shook the bridge.
We.
Ntsiki, what is the moral of the story?
Is it maybe that the people who do the least are the most proud of their work?
No, you're very far. You can do much better than that.
Really?
Yes.
If the mouse is saying we shook the bridge and there was an elephant on the bridge.
I have the greatest, highest regard for you. So don't disappoint me. I want us to enjoy this because you know what? I'm very proud of what you have achieved.
Tamaku.
Oh.
Tamaku.
Here's the moral of the story.
Okay.
Size does not count. What counts is presence in life. Look how strategic the mouse is. It is not considerate of its size, but it makes a pronouncement. Right? A very powerful pronouncement. We shook the bridge. Because this is what it is about. It's about presence and nothing else but presence. And as we speak today, Africa has no presence in the world. Because we want to believe that our size counts. Our size does not count. It's how we mark history and how we lead. The mouse led. And you know what is the dichotomy? The elephant was not even aware the bridge had shaken. Isn't that interesting? So, using this metaphor, I'm saying, until we collapse the current knowledge architecture and we replace it with the original African knowledge architecture, you will not free Africa. You will not change the world. It's as simple as that. Because, Ntsiki, look at it. We are not physically enslaved any longer. We're not physically oppressed, but we are mentally manipulated, co-opted, and condemned. So the only thing that can free us is knowledge. And that is why, when COVID happened, it threw a lot of curveballs at all of us. I lost 3 million rands of investment in the Pilansberg and Sun City corridor. And I lost a partner, and may his soul rest in peace. Vuyisile Charles Ndabeni. And that was 2020, we had a 2 billion rands contract signed to do the most lucrative route from Sun City into the park. It's 195 million rands turnover business. We're very excited. For 20 years, with the owners of the land, So we're dealing with issues of equity, management, empowerment, and all that. We're very excited, and COVID happened, and we lost. And he passed on. But guess what? I then said, this is an opportunity, because if you throw everything in one basket, you're in trouble. When something like that, when that disaster, by the way, it was man-made, by the way. When that disaster happened, you lose everything. So we've restructured. Guess what is our core business now? You remember I started this in 2016. Global Tourism Legacy Networks Pty Limited have a global character and perspective. Tourism, people think tourism is about beds and seats. No, it's about collection of memories and experiences, sometimes life-changing experiences. And then we talk about legacy. Legacy is so key. Without impact, without social and economic transformation, whatever we do has no meaning. And lastly, networks, it's all about us, doing things together. So in 2022, 2023, we restructure the business. Guess what we do now? Our core business, we package the original African knowledge and we harvest it from what, and may his soul rest in peace, because this is the man that made me change my life.
Can I ask Mr. Ndabeni that we start from the beginning, because now we've moved to 2023 and we haven't even started.
I know. We shook the bridge.
We shook the bridge. So let's start from the beginning. Where did you grow up? Tell us a bit about your childhood and the type of person you were.
I was born in the south of Johannesburg. My mother was a domestic worker. How strange that we refer to her. We're using the literature and the vocabulary of the owners of the means of production. Only 6 families who monopolize the economy of the world. And we refer to my mother as a domestic servant. You know why? Because she carries the most superior womb in the world. Her womb is sacred, is sacrosanct, is pure and original. And she has a special relationship with the land. She has a spiritual relationship with the land. She is the source of the conflict of the world. And how she's being totally demeaned and be told to look after the domestic environment. She's born as a leader. You remember before we were colonized and enslaved, we had queens. She's a queen, she's a panther, she's a matriarch, but listen to the word I used. My mother was a domestic worker. Shame on me, because she was never a domestic worker. She and the lion are the only two species that can intervene on our deteriorating climate and our deteriorating ecosystem, because they have a special relationship with the land. Because who is the land? The land is God. She's a co-creator with God. So I get emotional about this because she made me who I am, and yet I call her domestic work. So the language has to change, Ntsiki, That's why I say I'm a knowledge architect, the guy who does the food, they call this person a chef. He's not a chef, he's a food architect, right? We've got to change the literature and the vocabulary so that we plug into the original, right? We're talking about matriarchs. We're talking about kings and queens. And we're not talking about domestic workers. Let me just double click. So she worked for a family that was close to the royal family in England, the Mahons, in Florida. That's why I was called Charles. And that's why I hate the name Charles so badly. Because the British monarchy is a criminal syndicate. They've killed 250 million people around the world, stole 450 million hectares of land. Why should we celebrate them? So Nomvula Mapula Zwani, gave birth to me 22nd of October, 1964. I'm turning 60 this year, so. And I think I'm still looking very young and very handsome.
Absolutely.
Yes, I like that. Maybe you'll help me find somebody. It's very difficult because the queens and the panthers and the matriarchs are no longer there.
What's there now?
Sure. We've got people who don't know who they are. You know what are the basic questions I ask when I want to engage with a woman? Very qualitative questions. Firstly, in Setswana, where is your umbilical cord? Where is it buried? Most of them don't even know what Kalani is. They don't. Inkabi. And when you don't know, there's something wrong with you. Because if you're born at the hospital, they incinerate it. If you're born at home, which is our African culture, by fitlile. At some place. And there's a whole thing that Gogo Grace Masuku taught me. And I'll tell you why I also did not go to her funeral, because the family defied her honors. But coming back, so Florida, and my grandfather was a farmer, Bishop Solomon Ndabeni. They were out in 8 Cake in Grot Mariko, and they became victims of forced removals. All of them were being pushed to the mines. And that's why they came to Western area. We stayed in Baggersdal, Vennespost, up until I did my matric in 1983. And guess what? I went to a monarchy called Boputhatswana. People think it was a homeland. It was not a homeland. It was a monarchy because it was led by a monarch. Kgosi, His Majesty Kgosi Manyane Mangope. For 17 years, he created a development that is unparalleled to date. To date, Ntsiki. No one, whether it's Muammar Gaddafi, whether it is Nkwame Nkrumah, no one can match what this man did in 17 years. With pieces of land, with no oil, with no gold, with no diamond. What he achieved, the first thing that he did was to work on the identity of his people. You know what was the ID document called in Boputhatswana? Ikitsi. Know yourself first. That's what it was called. So he prepared a Motswana who was 17 years ahead of us in 1994. The things they were doing, he took the whole of what Israel is and basically did a replica in Boputhatswana. I mean, Ntsiki, do you know that airport in Mahikeng has the second longest runway in the whole continent? the sixth longest in the world, right? The only airport in Africa that has an ALS. You know what an ALS is? Automatic landing system. So when the plane comes into its airspace, the equipment lands the plane, not the pilot. Its navigational infrastructure conflates in the whole of Southern Africa, right? And you call that a Bantustan leader? You call that a dictator? He defied apartheid. That stadium in Mahikeng has the second biggest seating capacity after FNB Stadium, 80,000, right? But guess what? By design, it is the only floating stadium in Africa. You know what that means? It's hanging on springs. Its foundation is 100 meters deep. So if there is an earthquake happening on this continent, the safest place to be is Mabatu Stadium.
What?
Bob Recording Studios, the best ever built recording studios in the world. Acoustically, there's no studio that compares to BRS. You know why? It's a floating studio. The foundation is 50 meters deep. So if there's a recording, there is going to be a seamless recording. There won't be any interruption. If you look at the infrastructure, this is 1991, right? It was 20 years ahead of its time. Both digital and analog at the same time, Ntsiki, right? So there's no sound engineer who gets there and says, listen, I'm only doing analog. No, you can interface between digital. This is 1991. And you know, there was a migration from analog to digital. You know what? They are now migrating back to analog because digital is flat, analog is broad. There's a chilling plant in that studio, Ntsiki. Water is circulated on a 24-hour basis. It is then pumped onto the top of the studio. There's a massive air-conditioned plant, which is green. This is 1991, right? Guess what happens? You know that when you start recording, your humidity level increases. This water is then oxygenated, and it is chilled to 2 degrees. And it is then poured into the studio so that it mitigates the humidity levels. This is 1991. The desks there, we're talking about 184 channels.
How come we don't hear about this leader?
Well, because the ANC was given an instruction to dismantle this economic development model called Boputhatswana. And they did that from 1994 to date. 30 years later, everything that was there in Ntsiki that this monarch had built, right? They've destroyed. They've collapsed it. The largest irrigation scheme in the entire continent was in Taung. Do you know why? Because every river in the then Boputhatswana and Western Transvaal, guess what? The catchment was Taung before the water goes to the sea. So he built the largest dam there to catch this water and built the biggest irrigation scheme. Guess what? A Bantustan was exporting barley to the rest of the world. That is in Taung. In Lubatla, in Motswedi, guess what? He was exporting vegetables and fruits to the rest of the world. And here's the deal. Every homeland got their 100% grants from the apartheid government in Pretoria. Guess how much Boputhatswana got? Only 20%. They generated their own 80%. The first monarchy to have a low-cost carrier, Bob Air. You know what was the cost from Mafeking to Johannesburg? Return ticket, 550 rands.
Why did the black people destroy Boputhatswana?
No, it is not the Africans who destroyed.
What happened?
It is the owners of the means of production, distribution, and exchange. The 8 families that owns 85% of this economy. If you allowed Bob to extend, you are basically inculcating, you are incubating a new Africa who can lead South Africa better than the Afrikaners, better than the English. Listen, Mahikeng is home to the only community university in Africa. The people of Bob built a university, right? They donated money, cows, right? If you look at the faculties there, I mean, the best nanotechnologist, and may his soul rest in peace, from my University of Boputhatswana.
You know why I'm shocked, Ntate Ndabeni? It's because when we were young, there was a narrative sold that Mangope is this power hungry, doesn't want to join the South African corporation, and they just made him seem like, oh my God, like what they did to Mugabe, basically. So can you give us a bit of the history and whatever so that we can correct that narrative?
Here's a deal. His father is a founding member of the ANC. Here's a deal. He was a member of the ANC Youth League. Here's a deal. He was taught maths and science by O.R. Tambo at St. Peter's in Rosentenville. Here's a deal. His fellows was Robert Mugabe, Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, Robert Smangaliso Sobukwe, Gavin Mbeki, you name it. But he was a monarch. He was a Kgosi, right? And look at the vision. You see, everything that has to do with the renaissance of Africa is two things: vision and leadership and execution, nothing else. So he did that. He created an economy. Yes, people are saying it was artificial, but guess what? 90% employment in Boputhatswana, 90%. And guess the other dichotomy. It is the only place where white people went there to look for work. They didn't go to the Transkei to look for work. They were deployed by Pretoria to look after their money. But in Bob, pilots came to work for Bob Air. Mabato Television, radio television, you name it. The banks, they had banks in Ntsiki. They had banks. They had a marketing board that would buy all the proceeds from the farmers every year, right? They had a development corporation. When they were sort of like, de-established in 1994, guess what was SEBO? SEBO was the PIC. The PIC in actual fact is modeled on SEBO. Guess what was the balance sheet of the PIC? At the time, the so-called New South Africa happened. They had 45 billion rands balance sheet.
Guys.
This is 1994. You need to ask the so-called liberation movement, because I don't see the equity at all. What exactly did they create? Well, what exactly did they liberate us from? Because we're still not liberated economically. But what value did they create in 30 years? Juxtaposed to the 17 years that Kgosi Mangope had. The best bus building infrastructure asset, Jura built. Go and look at it in Pretoria, what it looks like today. The industrial parks, I'm talking about 6 industrial parks. Go and look at the state of those industrial parks. Ntsiki, I'm also talking about conservation estate. This man was a conservationist. He built Pilansbeck. He built Madikwe. He built all those 16 game. Go and see. Ntsiki, there's no game. The fences are gone, right? He was generating, he did 2 things. He created institutions. Because remember, that's the only way you can grow an economy. You need institutions, right? And he also created assets, commercial assets. That's why he was making money. And that is why he could take that money and invest. And I mean, let's look at the judiciary. Where does Mogoeng comes from? University of Boputhatswana. Sisi Kampepe, Judge Nkabinde, you name them, right? I mean, the law faculty at the University of Boputhatswana was run by the best, Professor Cayman Nathan, right? The best. And guess where she's buried? She's buried in Motswedi, and she's Jewish, by the way. The only Jewish woman buried in a village in Africa, and is being celebrated. So when people say Boputhatswana was a homeland, Boputhatswana was a curse, was a disaster, I don't know where they're coming from. Because I was deployed with John Lamula, the current CEO of SAA, with the late Sheena Duncan, and I worked in Boputhatswana. And funny enough, all the reports I wrote back to headquarters. Yes, there's human rights challenges in Boputhatswana, but the economic model we need to study and duplicate in the new South Africa. Those were my footnotes. And you know who had problems with them all the time? Dr. Frank Chikani says, I have a problem with these footnotes. So I know you said, where do I come from? I come from Beggersdal. I went to Bob. I got arrested. I got deported.
Arrested for?
You remember I was a deputy chairperson of the civic movement in Beggersdal, and we organized the biggest bus boycott in the West Rand. Till today, you can't see buses in the whole of the West Rand. We were the leadership. We went to prison, and when I came out of prison in 88, Joe Sremani got me a job at the SACC, very interestingly. And I was working in Bob. That's how I came to know about Bob, And I was fascinated with what they were doing. Ntsiki, let me be metaphoric again. For the first time, I saw Africans who were sober during the day, who were behind major assets. I mean, the best cargo pilots in South Africa, 100% of them were trained in Boputhatswana. The best CPLs, commercial pilots at SAA, Boputhatswana. So that man did so much. We're unveiling his tombstone, by the way, this Saturday. And Mogoeng gave the inaugural lecture. I just feel that, we could have done better, because this man represents what you call an embodiment of excellence in leadership in Africa. Yeah, there's a model there, and I don't understand why we dismantle the model. Because the first thing that Pupo Molefe and his cabinet did was to dispose of those assets.
What?
Yes. Can I tell you, he claims he's going to sue me, but I want to repeat it on your podcast again.
Oh, and then I must also get sued.
No, you're not going to get sued. I asked him a simple question. Sun City, the land belongs to the Lidach people and the Bakata people, right? 1,400 hectares. Guess what? 1994, instead of restituting the land to the rightful owners, they transfer the land to national government, right? And then they say they are the lessor and Sun City is the lessee, right? The people that own Ntsiki 45 years later. Sun City is turning 45 this year. Pilansberg is turning 45. 45 years later, the owners of the land have no equity, zero equity, have no management role, zero management. Sun City is run by people from outside of the Northwest. Procurement, zero. Sun City buys 1 million eggs, Ntsiki. None of those eggs are bought in the Northwest. Yet there are farmers around Sun City, right? So I asked him a question. Why did you transfer the land to national? 2, where's the lease agreement between Sun City, Sun International, and the national government? Because there isn't. This is an arrangement to frustrate these communities. But 2, very important, why did you transfer the physical assets that were built by the Bob government? And you know what are those physical assets? The Palace of the Lost City, the Cascades, the main hotel, and the cabanas. They were transferred in Ntsiki. They were not sold because they cannot produce a sale and purchase agreement 45 years later. So the balance sheet of Sun International, when they say they own Sun City, somebody needs to ask the question, who paid NWDC for the cost, the investment cost of building that which you see there?
So then where does Saul Kerzner fit in?
He just brought the brand. He's a brand strategist. He just brought the brand. Sun International, Sun City. That's it. Everything was done by the Northwest Development Corporation, which today is bankrupt, cannot pay its staff members. And yet, in 1994, it was sitting, I'm sure, with about close to about 500 million rands in its bank account. There's a company where I became CEO. You remember I became CEO, Northwest Parks and Tourism Board in 2003. Again, in the conservation space, Kgosi Mangope had created companies. And do you know why he created companies? So that he must make tourism affordable for his people. You could go to Bakatla Gate and sleep in a 5-sleeper chalet for 200 rands, all 7 of you. Today, it's not, right? And that's why people don't travel, And I was saying that to the minister. Deal with the issue of access and affordability and
economic
transformation.
exclusion.
Exactly. We are not physically oppressed today, but the economics is being used to exclude us. We can't go to places because we don't have the money. So look at Pilansberg. We had a company called Dirapeng. Ntsiki, this is criminal. Dirapeng, when I left, had a balance sheet of 500 million. Today has a 0 balance sheet. Because some premier called Supra Maumapelo decided to sell it for R1 to a company called Northwest Development Corporation. R1. This Dirapeng has 50% shares in a company called Pilansbeek Resorts. Guess who is the other partner? His name is Bart Dorenston. And guess what? Bart is the guy who owns the Michelangelo. Bart is the guy who owns the Da Vinci. Bart is the guy who owns the Leonardo, the latest, tallest building. Where did he get the money from? From the Pilansbeek. Do you know why? He's never declared dividends since 1991. Ntsiki, that's why they got rid of me. Because every time they see me, there's institutional memory. Two, I'm very knowledgeable about these issues. That's why I'm the most hated guy in the Northwest. But I'm still standing. You know, I'm still standing. Because every time I see them and I said, Bart, where are the dividends? You know? Ntsiki, it's criminal what the ANC has done in the Northwest. You know? But they have no conscience. And you know, when I say the ANC, I know I'm talking about an organization. The individuals it has deployed in the Northwest are evil people, are criminals. What they did to me personally, but what they've done to the people of the Northwest. You know, there's no water in the towns in the Northwest. There's no water. Go and see Mafikeng. It's full of potholes today. When in 1988, when I was on a charter bus and I traveled into Mafikeng, I marveled what I saw. I saw Africans in charge, driving the best cars. Mega City was the first ever built shopping mall in Africa, for your information. Leopard Park was the first ever built golf estate in Africa. Go and look at them today.
What?
Yes. That is why my company is in the business of packaging this knowledge, harvesting it, quality assuring it. We're now looking at developing a digital bank, and we're also looking at the option of creating our own cryptocurrency. But we're creating iconic African brands because we now have this knowledge, right? And then lastly, we're also using this knowledge to now implement what we call social and economic interventions in those townships and villages. I gave you Sunset, I gave you Pilansbeek. Let me give you Tlhabane Makgowa. Do you know why they call it Tlhabane Makgowa? The only township that had an urban development plan when it was built in 1945. It had robots. It had an industrial park. It had a cathedral. It had a casino. It had everything, right? Go and look at it today. There's nothing. There's nothing. That's why about Makgowa. That means when you go to town, we go to the industrial park where we were manufacturing goods. We're exporting from Tlhabane.
So what actually happened?
Total, leadership, development, and knowledge deficit. Deployment. You got in the wrong people. The agenda was to loot and plunder. And that's, Ntsiki, let me ask you, what do people in a bank steal? Money? In a butchery?
Meat?
In a bakery?
Bread?
In a brick factory?
Bricks?
In government?
Money?
No, Ntsiki. They steal a future and a development of a country. That's what has happened in 30 years. The future of this generation has been stolen. A development, think about what Boputhatswana could be today if the vision was not deferred and the economy disrupted. Because we were so they hated Kgosi Mangope with so great passion. The narrative was that he killed our people. Listen, people don't know. Can I tell you another example? One of the brands we created as Global Tourism Legacy Networks is called Africa Liberation Festival. Do you know what we want to do? We want our people, especially young people, to lock into 1912 to 1994. So we organized this festival to commemorate the 30th anniversary of the Mafikeng massacre. But guess who denies that there was no massacre? The ANC. And yet, when you can recall, on the 10th of March 1994, there was a massacre in Mafikeng. But This was the massacre that changed the fortunes of South Africa. People don't know this.
No, we don't.
Yes. The AWB and the Afrikaner Volksstaat Army got into Mafeking to take over the airport because they would launch any onslaught on South Africa from that airport. They were not invited by Kgosi Mangope. They are lying, right? Guess what? They met their own match on that day, the Bob Police and the Bob Defense Force. Guess how many of them were killed? 160, but it's not been mentioned. They were killed at the airport. So when they were running away, they started killing our people on their way out. That's when that young man, Untlametse Minyatso, at TTA, took a gun and killed them alive. And Ntsiki, do you know?
The ones in the car.
Yeah, the ones in the car.
That picture, that famous picture.
And it went live. Eh? Do you know when you Google that, do you know what it says? The death of apartheid. Isn't that interesting? And yet the ANC says that is not part of the liberation heritage. So when I wanted to do that event, you know what they did? Firstly, they told me that the stadium is not available. So I drove to Mafeking, the stadium was available. Then I got a letter to say the stadium is not functional. The stadium has structural problems. And then I drove to Mafeking and I said, give me the engineering report. It was an agenda to make sure that we don't put in 60,000 people in that stadium. Then I went to the Department of Arts and Culture, Ntsiki. And then I said, guys, I'm doing a 60,000 event, right? 60,000 event. It's a 35 million rands value event. Can you give me 5 million rands? Because that's the production cost. But I'll donate back 10 million to the Liberation Corridor Fund. And that is going to look on the MK soldiers. Guess what they did? They met and they were given instruction, not this one. And that's why I had to postpone my festival. 60,000 people were coming. And when you look at the production, I had Caiaphas later opening up. Second, I had Mahwecha, Don Laka, with Selailo, with Johnny Selelwane from Botswana and Budaza. Then after that, we have Mahwecha with Oskido. I tell you, guess what? A big threat for them. And they made sure that this thing does not happen.
Ndabeni, I want to go back to the history because the youth needs to be fed the history of our country, most importantly. Ne?
Yes.
So you mentioned earlier on, you were talking about Boputhatswana and why it shut down, and you talked about 8 families that own the means of production in South Africa. Can we just unpack that? What do you mean when you say that? When you say South Africa's owned, and please just unpack it nicely for us.
Okay. Let me juxtapose that question with this. Ntsiki, are you aware that on the 20th of September 2018, Makonjwa Mountains in Mpumalanga was declared the cradle of life? No, Ntsikelelo. Are you aware? Do you know that even our government is not aware? Do you know what is the implication of that statement? No, Ntsiki, you are not serious. There is now scientific evidence. I want you to listen carefully. There is now scientific evidence that early life started in Africa, dating 3.5 billion years ago. 3.5 billion years ago. That means Africa is the genesis of everything, of science, of technology. So the characterization of Africa as a dark continent beset by disease, corruption, and fraud is because of the current knowledge architecture, where we are just a market, right? Now, when I plug into the knowledge, you must read the manuscript. And you know, it's very interesting who applied for the listing of Makonjwa as a World Heritage Site. Abelungu, farmers in that area. Nati Mtetwa became a guest at that event in Bahrain when this place, this Africa, was declared as the cradle of life. Do you know what they're trying to do now? To delist it. Because the knowledge that some of us are now getting from there, Ntsiki, is scary. Right? It's scary.
It's too empowering for black people.
In actual fact, the day, and that's our business now. We're not even selling it because Credo Mutwa said, My son never monetized this knowledge. It's oralized all the time from generation to generation. Don't disrupt the oralization of this knowledge. And that's what we're doing. We're doing it for free. Where we're making money, it's with the brand properties, the events and the products. 60 kilometers, Ntsiki, from Makonjo Mountains, there's a place called Nzalo, your favorite place. Do you know that it is the birthplace of the sun? Do you know that our new year is not the 1st of January, it's the 23rd of September? The sun is amplified away from the northern hemisphere on the 21st, and it's fully amplified on the 23rd at Nzalo. Right? So we're celebrating the wrong calendar. It has huge implications, socially, economically, and otherwise. But because we are consumers, we are made to celebrate the 1st of January with the northern hemisphere, the owners of our economy. So I go back to the knowledge, unplug this current knowledge. Hey, let me give you 2 examples. Are you aware, and I'm metaphoric now, are you aware there's not a single township in this country, when you drive to work in the morning, the sun is in your face. When you drive in the afternoon, the sun is in your face. Are you aware of that? Can I repeat it again? Abantu baseSoweto, when they go to Joburg in the morning, the sun is in their face. When they drive in the afternoon, the sun is in their face. Do you think it was by default? No, it was by design. Because these were labor camps, Ntsiki. 30 years later, our own government has not designed new towns. There's not one city. Kgosi Nyalala Pilani tried. They disrupted that city called Murule. They disrupted. Molwane tried in Puking. They disrupted that city. Because they don't want us to be free. So when I say there are 8 families, Ntsiki, go and do your homework. There are 8 families that owns the global economy. And they've created 5 institutions that sustains their ownership and power over the rest of the 8 billion citizens. You know what are those institutions? The White House. What does the White House do? It kills people. But the White House has sister organizations, the Union Building. There's about 300 of these White Houses all over the world. They're headed by politicians, criminals.
Parliaments.
No, politicians. All of them are criminals. They commit crimes every day. But they are not in jail. But those that are fighting against criminality are in jail or are hunted like some of us, because we are going to enlighten our people and make them free. Ntsiki, let me tell you, the elections of the 29 are predetermined, right? So I am saying very openly to our people, especially young people, don't waste your time. Don't go and vote. Because, if we withdraw our vote, there won't be a government.
But the problem with that is that the white people are voting, so it's just going to go to DA.
No. Remember, there's a threshold. If white people were to vote in Ntsiki, they will not reach the threshold in which they would form a government. If Africans stayed away on the 29th, we would create an opportunity for us to have an economic codessa and to usher back the monarchy. There is no institution, Ntsiki, that can lead this country, this continent, except the African monarchy. Because remember, kings and queens are not elected, they are born. They are not leaders by default, they are leaders by design. And therefore, that is what is very important. So I go back to your question. They created the White House. They've created the Vatican, right? And I'm very happy the disruption that is happening within the Vatican and the so-called charismatic churches. Did you think what just occurred about T.D. Jakes was real? It is real. Evil people cloaked as the best, the most Christian, right? Look at what is emerging. And I can give a prophecy, and I gave it 2 weeks ago. The Pope, maybe not this one, but the next one, they're going to assassinate him. And the Vatican is going to collapse. Right? But guess what also is going to collapse? The White House. Because these are evil institutions. Thirdly, they created an institution called FIFA. Ntsiki, you know, for 90 minutes, poor people forget that they are poor, right? And they watch a soccer game. And 90 minutes later, they come back to the reality that they have no energy, they have no food. And yet Messi and Ronaldo, and there's not a single African player, by the way, and yet our players are the best players. They're idolized, yeah? Messi and them gets paid millions of dollars, while the rest of the world are trapped in poverty, hardcore poverty. The fourth institution is Hollywood and the media. Look at the South African media. What you are doing here, they're not doing. They should be doing this, Ntsiki, not you. But they will not do because they are being paid to drive and peddle this narrative, you know, that South Africa is a great country, Nelson Mandela, democracy. All this is criminality. A crime was committed. People took our land, but nobody's arrested, right? Now, the last institution they created is the British monarchy. Criminal. There are still 16 countries run by Britain today. They are not free. Their sovereignty is surrendered to the British monarchy. And you call that the world is free? Let me conclude and say the world is where it is today, not because of evil men, but because of the silence of good men. And that is why, you know, I've put together on the 17th and the 20th of May, as part of celebrating Africa Day, what we call the Africa Social and Economic Investment Colloquium at Sun City. 6,000 social entrepreneurs in the continent and the world will converge. And guess we're discussing only one issue, the Africa we want, which was launched by Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma in 2013. What have we achieved 10 years later? And the answer is zero.
So then how do we get back the economy?
Ntsiki, the basics. Install the monarchy, because remember, once the monarchy is in charge, South Africa is a constitutional monarchy, the assets do not belong to the monarchy, they belong to the people. You know that you can't find street kids in our villages. Do you know why? Because there's a social system that absorbs those that are weak in society, right? So the only way you can resolve the African problem, let the monarchy lead. And by the way, I'm not obsessed with this. Look at the best run countries in the world. They're all led by monarchs. Japan, Canada, the Netherlands. China is a form of monarchy because there's no elections in China. There's only one leader who is in charge. And guess what? Everybody has a blueprint. And that is why, you know what is China's vision? Urbanize rural China by 2080. That's what they're doing. They're urbanizing. Do you know why they're urbanizing rural China? Because their biggest population is in the rural space. So they don't want the migration to happen into the towns. So they're investing in their rural. That's why, Ntsiki, and I'm answering your question, you cannot resolve the South African economic crisis until our economy produces and sells. But currently, our economy sells and buys. When you sell, you don't produce anything. You can't create jobs by selling. We sell our raw material and we buy back our raw material. You're not going to change the economy. Two, we have an education system that is fraud. For 12 years, our kids memorize information that has nothing to do with them. Jambali. Kom Jambali. Hey, let's say Fro say Jalian. And then 12 years later, you don't even know who Jambali is because Jambali does not exist. And then they say you write a matric examination. Do you know what the matric examination is? Is to determine whether your memorization is good or not. Not whether you carry knowledge, competency, and skill. And look at the opposite in China. Do you know I went back to my old school in Beckersdale the other day? We were 400 in the school. Today they are 1,600. So it's 1:68 in a classroom. Guess how much our government is giving that school per annum? 1.5 million rands. Do you know when you do an appropriation, Ntsiki, our government is spending 550 rands per student. Guess what China is spending? $50,000 per student. So the Africa we want, Ntsiki, cannot happen unless we have institutions. One, we have one army in Africa that has the military power to enforce the change that we want. Without that army, the world will never change. So you need a strong, that's what Muammar Gaddafi was saying, one Africa, right? One army, so that we can also engage with America and the rest of the other, military powers. But until you do that, we will not realize this vision of 2063. Two, you need African spirituality to take over religion. Religion is fraud. In the script, there's a chapter that talks about African spirituality and the hierarchy of divinity. You know what it says? It says Motu, Batu, Badimu, Mudim. There's no gender, there's no race. Isn't that powerful? Umtu, Abantu, Amadlozi, Unkulunkulu. There's no race, there's no gender. Right? So the minute you genderize and you racialize God, you do that for an agenda. And that agenda is not original to the original agenda. It is at variance. And that is why religion, the first thing that it does, it strips you of your identity. Today, Gumxhosa, Gomso, you are a Christian.
Born again.
And you are told that you have sinned. They say Jesus is the answer. What was the question? Right? They say the Jews are the chosen one. What criteria did God use to choose them? And then they say they traveled for 40 years in the desert. Ntsiki, do you know what is the distance? It's 1,300 kilometers. It's from here to Cape Town. There is no way they can travel for 40 years. And Ntsiki, did you know that the Democratic Republic of the Congo is the most richest country in the world? 120 million people, right? The Congo River is the largest and the most deepest river in the world. 10 of the 12 months is the rain season in the DRC. They can generate hydro energy for the whole world. They can provide food for the whole world. But you know why the DRC is poor? Because it's bordered by 10 countries. And all those 10 countries are poor. And their military are conduits for Western powers. They are the ones who are destabilizing that country, including Kagame. Kagame has the biggest gold refinery equipment in the world, but there's no gold in Rwanda. Where is he getting the gold from? And we are told that he's the best president in Africa, right? Who killed General Riguema Kisa? Museveni and Kagame must tell us. You see, where do I get this knowledge? From the knowledge corridors. And that is why we are saying we want the social enterprise movement. We need about $100 million to harvest this knowledge from these corridors in the next 20 years in Ntsiki and package the original knowledge, because only Africa, the cradle of life, can save the world.
So earlier you said that the solution is having a monarch.
Yes.
Now, there are so many different kingdoms in South Africa. How would we resolve that?
Well, you remember, we would need to establish a monarchy council. And you remember, once you talk monarchy, you also talk royalty. And within royalty, you talk about the intelligentsia of the monarchy. Right? The uncles, Abo Rakadi, you name them. They are a nucleus of the intelligence, and it has nothing to do with hereditary. It has nothing to do with age. They would know who is the one who must lead us, because they have their own college, like you have in America, the so-called college during the election college. So they would screen. Okay, let's go back to China. Why would America have a difficulty to know who's the next president of China? Because it's done by the elders.
Flip.
Yeah. In China,
But then still,
at an early age, they send you to rural China because they've identified your talent, right? And they leave you there, Ntsiki, for years. And their elders are watching you. They're doing an evaluation every year on you, on your character, on your personality, on your capabilities and everything. One day from nowhere, you are told that you are wanted by the Politburo in Beijing. And you have no clue, right? We used to do the same, Ntsiki. You did not become a king because you are the next son. No, you became the king because the college decided that you are the king. And you know who were the key members of the college? Abogogo. Because they are the knowledge custodians. They are the knowledge bearers. They are the knowledge generators. Without them, listen, in our family structure, Gogo is the head of the family. Then there's Rakhadi. You know why they say Rakhadi? Because she's the only one who understands how a womb works. That's why about Rakhadi, not Makhadi, Rakhadi. She's a sister to your brother. Then there's Mangwani, who is a sister to your mother. Guess who she is? She has midwifery skills, right? And then there's Malume. That's why about Malume, the uncle. He is the ambassador in the family. He understands the values of the family. So when you want to get married, they say, go and talk to Malume, right? When the child, an African child, is born, Ntsiki, guess who cuts the umbilical cord? Malume. And takes that umbilical cord and buries where you are born. Now, coming back to Mama Suku, she gave a directive. You must make sure within 48 hours I'm buried. And I'm buried at 2 o'clock in the morning when the land is still moist. Because if you bury me after 12, the land is dry. And I'm going to have a difficulty to incarcerate. Incarnation. He says, when the land is dry, I can't incarcerate. And they buried her somewhere else, not Ekaya. Because she should have been buried next to her umbilical cord. And guess with what? You wrap her body with the skin of a cow. Why the skin of a cow? Because it does not devour for 6 years.
Oh, this is beautiful.
This is the knowledge, man.
We're back at the umbilical cord.
This is the knowledge. This is the knowledge. Until we can replug to the original knowledge, Ntsiki, we will not resolve the challenges that we have until we go back to our villages and we Litsema, you know, when we talk about Litsema, where all of us work, you know, for the good of the village, where there's discipline. So I'm creating products, by the way. You know, my son can slaughter a simple thing, a chicken, because they're busy with their cell phones. So we're creating a product where we're taking them back to the village and they get experienced around issues of cultural identity and heritage.
Ntate Ndabeni, it would be nice to have a long conversation. Otherwise, our alarm clock is about to go off. Thank you so much for joining us. Obviously, we did say that this episode is dedicated to Mamu Grace Masuku. We will definitely put her picture up there.
Thank you.
And regards to the family, and thank you for all the work that you do. Thank you so much for coming through. Moya, right? There we have it. Oh my gosh, so much information on the Northwest, Boputhatswana and Kgosi Mangope. That is a lot. So please, can you go do all your researchings and find out where you fit in this line of heritage. Love and light. See you next time.
Who are you when all you were has been diluted by lies and white lines cancelling out all that which has been written of your history? Why do you look at yourself as a mystery? Doesn't the sun shine because you open your eyes? Doesn't the moon stay situated within the same stars your DNA sparkles off? Your spirit knows that surely corner into e off. Buza umoya so you may return to being well off. Because spiritually you are rich, yet your ancestors cry because you are out of reach. But yours is to command all elements while God takes inspiration from the very mirror she looked at to become. Remember who you are and never finish just when they think that with you they are done.